Welcome to Pulp Mortem, the search for a lost fantasy classic. Hello everybody, my name is Jake, and before we get to the review, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Pulcho. I always start my morning with a glass of Pulcho. Oh yeah.
That's right, the original pink drink from Mars is the ultimate stimulant.
At the end of a busy workday, Pulcho helps me unwind.
Whether you need to deaden your meaningless sense of existence in this cruel world or just a social lubricant, Pulcho punches your ticket.
Whew, after a hot yoga sesh, there's nothing like my Pulcho.
Pulcho is loaded with electrolytes, vitamins, carcinogens, detritus, and minerals.
I immerse my entire naked body in Pulcho. I love the way it makes my skin pucker and tingle. It's also removed a skin tag down here and saved me from having to pay for a vasectomy.
Don't do this. Pulcho can strip the paint off a starship. But seriously, bud, get out of the tub. No, stop. Hey, don't do. Pulcho. When on Mars, choose Pulcho.
Thirsty? But first, we need to talk about the oak. Otis Adelbert Kline was an American editor, literary agent, and science fiction author born July 1st, 1891. Kline contributed to the Pulps off and on and was an assistant editor at Weird Tales. In fact, his first published work was in Weird Tales No. 1. A contemporary to Edgar Rice Burroughs, perhaps what is more widely known than any of Kline's work was his rivalry with ERB. Now, whether the feud or not was real, I can't verify it. It's likely it was a rumor that grew legs 80 or 90 years ago, or perhaps they had some work that was, similar to say the least. Supposedly, Donald A. Wollheim once admitted in an article to making up the feud, but the rumors didn't die there. I mean, come on, look at this here. Kline wrote a handful of novels, but in the mid-30s he turned his attention to being a literary agent, most notably representing Robert E. Howard. And some believe Kline to be responsible for posthumously finishing Howard's Almuric. Apparently, it was well known that Kline was an exuberant fan of food and drink, and unfortunately, he died of a heart attack in 1946 at the age of 55. His friend and fellow author Eric Frank Russell said of him, "A more likable individual it would be hard to find. Plump, jovial, generous, he seemed to have hundreds of friends and no enemies." Except John Clute, who was like that racist, sexist, all across, ever-loving. Which brings us to the Swordsman of Mars. Galaxy Magazine called the author of this book the only serious competitor of Edgar Rice Burroughs. If you have ever enjoyed the exploits of a Tarzan, you will not want to miss the Swordsman of Mars. Well, that was less than helpful. Let's read the first page, see what it says here. Escape from the humdrum of Earth with the Swordsman of Mars, as Harry Thorne, American, pits himself against the best duelists and the most devilish monsters of the Red Planet in this action-packed book of adventure, romance, and daring-do on a fantastic world. Frederick Pohl, reviewing The Swordsman of Mars by Otis Adelbert Kline in an If magazine, said, "It has exactly the merits of the Edgar Rice Burroughs Mars books, excitement and a sure victory of good over evil." I guess that's a little more helpful. The Swordsman of Mars was first published in Argosy in 6 parts in 1933, and then all 6 were compiled in an Avalon book hardcover in 1960. I own the Ace paperback edition that came out the very next year. It has 174 pages and originally cost 35 cents. The cover is by Ed M. Schwiller, and what's there to say here? This book is, without fail, bought by everyone who sees it out in the wild. When I close my eyes and think, Pulp, this is a picture in my mind. We have our heroic swordsman here, wearing his best red skirt for a night out on the town. There's a scantily clad Mars warrior babe fighting alongside him, but the star of this cover is by far these little alien fellas here. I mean, just look at them. Yeah. Pretty sure Nick from the Book Graveyard sent this to me in a book trade, but I can't remember for certain. But, I mean, it sounds like something he'd do.
Which is cool, man. I should do that more often. It's very thoughtful of me, if I don't mind me saying.
You can find this paperback here online for under $10. The original hardcover goes for $30 to $50 or even more, depending on the condition. But those original Argosy mags, those will cost you a pretty penny. We're on week 3 of Fantasy February, and this was by far the most hotly contested week, with this and Rembrandt's Hat just vying for first place. Once the poll slowed, these two were tied for the longest time. Then a final vote fell and tipped the scales to Swordsman, and he won by 1%. Now, as you look at each of those options for each week's poll, I kind of tried to mix things up, do different style options of fantasy. The thing is, I almost didn't put this one on there because clearly it's planetary romance or Sword and Planet. Now, is that particular subgenre fantasy or science fiction? It seems like people are pretty split on that. My personal take on them is it's kind of both. Like, obviously we're on Mars, but there's also fairies. And the science is so far removed from actual science that it is magic by any other name. Science fiction, fantasy, I don't know. You guys can debate it in the comments. I just put it up there. 31% of you were like, this is it, so here we go. All right, so what's to like? Sword and Planet. This book is exactly what you think it is. Since the back cover told us nothing, I'll briefly summarize it, but I really don't need to. If you've read Sword and Planet or Planetary Romance like Burroughs' Barsoom series or anything like that, then you already know the plot. Our hero, Harry Thorne, wakes up after a botched self-deletion attempt. We know very little about our protagonist other than he is unlucky in love, has a failed business, and perhaps is some sort of scientist? I don't know. What we do know is that he is a master swordsman, because of course he is. Now our hero, Harry Thorne, wakes up and realizes that he has been saved by this mad scientist. The scientist says that he has discovered a way to use telepathy via radio waves, but not just to read minds, but to swap minds. As it turns out, this scientist has a pen pal, a Martian scientist, who lived on Mars 1,000,000 years ago. So apparently, if a Martian and a human look similar, then it goes to reason that their brain waves are similar, and so that they can make a swap. If you can find a Martian and a human duplicate, you can just kind of do this clean trade, okay? But the crazy thing is, it works. Unfortunately, the first volunteer, a man named Frank Boyd, wasn't properly vetted. So he traded bodies with a Martian, an ancient Martian named Selhan, and they swapped. But now Frank Boyd, now Selhan, has gone rogue. He has allied himself on Mars with an evil Martian force and is trying to take control of the entire planet. So Harry Thorne swaps minds with Borgen Takor, a Martian, with one mission. He's given one mission: to kill Selhan. Now you may say, wait a minute, this isn't anything like John Carter or the Lawrence series or Dre Prescott or Chash or The Radio Man. It's not like any of those things. It sounds super unique. And you'd be right, it did. For 12 pages. And then we are straight up Sword and Planet. Now, if you've never read a planetary romance, I'll explain it just briefly. It's a breakneck pace. There's always a princess, there's always politics, always airships and alien sidekicks. Our hero is constantly being saved last-minute Deus Ex Machina style. Plot convenience, plot contrivance galore, ending with the hero leading an army, getting the girl, and becoming royalty without fail. Sword Planet it's a power fantasy. I've heard it described as its and then style of storytelling, like, and then he fell into the cliff, and then there was an alien monster, and then another alien monster, and then someone comes and saves him. That actually is a scene that happened. They're dumb, they're fun. Sword and Planet, they're popcorn reads. You just turn your brain off, enjoy the ride. They're very formulaic, but I mean, I enjoy a good S&P every once in a while. And now, the bad. You might be saying, uh-oh, there wasn't a lot of points in the good section. The truth of the matter is, every good point I could have thought of and divvied it up into, they fit into that S and Planet genre, that subgenre there. Everything you like about Sword and Planet novels, they're in this book, so I made it more succinct. Likewise, a majority of the bad points I can think of will fit neatly into this next thing I'm going to say now. This book is clunky. The exposition is ham-fisted, the tone is very stuffy, the dialogue is stiff and awkward, and Let me read you. I know I've already read the book on the first page. There's an appreciation by Vernal Coriel. I'm going to read this to you. The creator of Tarzan and John Carter of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs, was, without a doubt, the most famous author of fantasy adventure. Though his imitators were legion, only one man was able to compete successfully with Burroughs. He was Otis Adelbert Kline. Though they wrote for the same publishers and were filmed by the same movie studios, Kline never meant to compete with Burroughs. He admired the author, and was his enthusiasm for that type of story that inspired him to create his own universe of planets of peril, peopled by swashbuckling planeteers and stimulating sirens. On guard! You have in hand the Swordsman of Mars. This is not the science fiction of computers and analogs. There will be no roar of rockets. This is for the reader who wants a free-fall flight into fantastic adventure with star-flung heroes fighting furiously for honor on worlds without it, and beautiful maidens who know there is a fate worse than death. This is for the reader who likes his thrills unique, his fiction spellbinding from first page to last. Touché? Then Otis Adelbert Kline is your meat. The only author to be compared with Edgar Rice Burroughs, but whose work is as original as Burroughs' own. Man, they really want you to compare this to Edgar Rice Burroughs. They really want you to compare this book to the Barsoom series. The thing is, I like Edgar Rice Burroughs, okay? I really like him. But let's not pretend like he's this wordsmith, right? Like, you can throw Edgar into a bucket of YA action or story action adventure writers, and you wouldn't be able to pull him out of the bucket. He has a very simple, action-oriented prose, right? So although the story is very similar, the structure is very similar, the style could not be more different. Edgar Rice Burroughs writes like an everyman. He's approachable to anyone, or accessible. Maybe approachable. Approachable and accessible. That's ERB. Kline here writes like a robot. Kline has a better economy of words than Burroughs, but it has a standoffish feel to it. There's no heart in this, which one could argue, hey, that's kind of a pillar of planetary romance. But this just feels cold. The dangerous Martian force. The Magongi are so silly looking. I mean, yeah, it's speculative fiction, but you could have created anything other than these pot-bellied wimps. But let me clarify. I love them. But in the story, unfortunately, the Magongi are a not-so-subtle stand-in for Chinese. This was written in 1933, and unfortunately, Asian prejudice was fairly commonplace during that era. It wasn't just the physical appearance that was compared to Chinese, but that was the most problematic. We are told and reminded multiple times, among other things, how yellow they were. Very yellow. But on the cover, they look green. Was Ed Emshwiller taking some artistic liberties here? I don't know, because if you look closely, you can see that the base paint color on these guys is yellow. Was this a painting mistake? A little too much green highlight? Or maybe Ed was like, come on, you guys, this was 30 years ago. I can't give them this hat and then leave them yellow. Again, it wasn't just the color, there was more. But, I don't know. As we know, there were a great many things in that era that were perfectly, as I said, commonplace and acceptable that just won't fly in 2025. Honestly, it's not as bad as many of these books out here. So even if you're a more sensitive reader, you should still be all right with this book. Again, I'm not passing judgment on Kline one way or the other. I'm just letting you know it's in here. So do with that what you may. You know, that's all I'm going to dive into, the good and the bad. Obviously, there's more I could pick at, but those first two initial points of the good and the bad really do summarize how I feel about this book. But, come on, Sword and Planet, you know there's fun here. Mars Garb. I was wondering if Kline was going to address whatever the heck our hero had on his head, and I wasn't disappointed. That on his head is a translucent giant butterfly hide that can be draped over his body, pulled down to protect him from the sun, because obviously the sun's less atmosphere on Mars. The sun is hotter. It's a clear blanket. It's a clear blankie. This is explained and never mentioned again, which is a very good thing, because you can't sword fight, you can't swim away from aquatic predators, fly atop giant buzzards, swashbuckle, or kiss your fairy girlfriend while hiding under a clear blankie. Traveling on Mars is fun. Obviously, there's the standard flying, airships. He's flying on creatures, riding creatures, lots of cool things to get around. My two favorite are when Harry Thorne escapes from a prison. That's another trope, Sword and Planet. You get captured and escape 12 times. He escapes from his prison and has to cross this desert. Now, it could be difficult and obviously very dangerous crossing a desert, but good thing he had his desert shoes. What are desert shoes, you may ask? Well, they are stilts, long stilts, with springs at the bottom, and you just boing across the desert. Well, dang it! We crossed this desert, no problem. But how do I cross this marshy bog? Start inflating your water shoes. There's not a scene in this book where somebody is not without a glass of Pulcho.
Pulcho!
I honestly wish I was counting. There were dozens, literally dozens of times our hero is accepting a glass of Pulcho. He's sipping it, chugging it, shooting it, brewing it. Pulcho, 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 Pulcho. I wish I was recording it. Now you ask, what is Pulcho? It's obviously this Martian beverage. Is it space coffee? Mars liquor? Alien tea? I don't know. Actually, I do know. No, Pulcho is the ultimate drink. Pulcho quenches your thirst. Pulcho rejects your categories categorically. Pulcho is... Listen, I knew that this was going to be a joke that only people who actually read this book can appreciate, yet I still wrote it and still filmed all this, so... So the hero wins at the end.
Ooh, spoiler alert.
Shut up. Anyways, our hero wins, but not only does he save Mars, he's awarded a fancy title. Now, I'm sure you have a fancy title at your work that you're very proud of and very elaborate and very, shooshed up a bit. Listen, your title, you've got nothing on Harry Thorne. Let me show you. Sheb Takor, Supreme Arbiter of Destiny and Custodian of Liberty. Fiercely, he bent down, crushed those warm red lips against his own. So apparently our hero is the worst kisser on Mars. Maybe that's why his fiancée left him. Maybe I'm being too hard on him. Maybe he just needs some help. He just needs some tips. Now, I don't want to brag, but I've been told that I'm a very good kisser. I'm sure my 98% male audience really wanted to know that. You know what? Let's not mess around with stereotypes, okay? Maybe you guys need some tips out there as well. Maybe you need some help. All right, here we go. Tip number 1. You can actually practice with your hand. Now, your hands might be rough like mine. You should moisturize, or in a pinch, you can give it a little bit of chapstick there. Pucker it together real good. If you're still struggling, you can put some googly eyes on there. There we go. Oh, looking good. Yeah, looking real good. So what's the verdict? Thrift Shop, 2 out of 5. It's okay. Very forgettable. It's fun because planetary romance subgenre is fun, but the lingering sense of Kline's boredom wouldn't go away. This is like bowling with a headache. Yeah, I guess it's fun, but did you have a good time? I suppose, but I need to go lie down now, or maybe, I don't know. Drink some Pulcho! That's so stupid. I'm gonna cut that out. I'm cutting that out. Sure, the cover's fun, and if you stumble across this in the wild for a couple bucks, I'd say sure. But don't go out of your way to look for it. Don't spend more than $1 or $2. I've read 4 Sword and Planet or planetary romance books over the last year, and this was the weakest. It was the worst by far. If you're in the mood for that, I would recommend The Radio Beasts by Ralph Milne Farley, and even Warrior of Larn by Gardner Fox. That was a lot of fun. And so you can seek those out if you got that S&P itch. Or to cure that S&P itch, you can force the Pulcho on it! And that is my review of A Swordsman of Mars. Have you read this? Or maybe a better question is, what is your favorite Sword and Planet story? Let us know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time with our Final Fantasy February pick, which for sure will not come out whilst we're still in the month of February because time is hard, February is short, and I'm stupid. Star Rider!